wrestling truly has more than one royal family. Or so the song goes, and few define working class wrestling royalty the way that the name Rhodes does. Although the Rhodes family in pro wrestling comprises three central names, their impact is long-lasting, starting in the 1960s and having an impact to this day 50 years later, and significantly into the future. When we think of royal wrestling families like the Harts, the Anawakis, the Von Erichs, we often have a picture of an incredible depth of performers all from one lineage, with practically every other family member being involved in the business in some capacity or at least married into it. That's what separates the Rhodes dynasty from the other ones that we've covered before. Check out those videos on our main channel. These three members truly made their impact. But it was and is an impact so big that other wrestling families haven't always had the same effect. Whether it's fan perception of what it meant to be a superstar, a groundbreaking character that was ahead of its time, or one causing a direct change to the entire wrestling industry itself, we simply can't underplay the importance of the Rhodes family. Starting with the patriarch of the Rhodes family, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, inarguably one of the most beloved and iconic legends in pro wrestling history. He started in very humble beginnings in Austin, Texas, the son of a plumber. That wasn't just something he said in his promos. Virgil Riley Runnels Jr. was born in 1945 in Texas, where he grew up and spent his childhood. Before pro wrestling, football gained the interest of Virgil Runnels, and he was considered a big prospect in high school, eventually playing in the American Football League before he was cut, and then went on to the Continental Football League, where he played for the Hartford Charter Oaks, with the team folding and putting an end to his pro football dream. But the American Dream lived on. It was in '67 he saw an advertisement for big-time wrestling in Boston, taking a chance with zero wrestling experience and driving to the Northeast, where he used his connections with the Funk Brothers, established in the pro ranks at the time, to bluff his way into becoming a trainee. It wasn't easy beginnings for Dusty, who was just 2 years into his marriage with his first wife, Sandra. They truly had tough times at the start, having to sleep in his car and eat Thanksgiving meals in a soup kitchen. Yeah, so when Dusty Rhodes talked about hard times, he experienced them in real life before he played them out in pro wrestling. It was also during his first marriage when he had two children, Dustin and Kristen Runnels. Yeah, we'll get to Dustin in a little bit though. Dusty Rhodes soon made his way south back to Texas, wrestling for the Von Erich territory of world-class championship wrestling, establishing himself as a villainous heel under the management of one Gary Hart. This is when he was first billed as Dusty Rhodes. After making his mark in the Lone Star State, he ventured across the country, forming a strong tag team with the aptly named Dirty Dick Slater, winning tag belts along the way, wrestling overseas in Australia and Japan, and this is when he would get his first real big break as a solo superstar. Wrestling in various NWA territories, he broke the archetype of what it meant to be a main event marquee pro wrestler. In an era where steroids and impressive physiques were becoming the norm, Dusty stood out thanks to his, let's say, average physique. Yes, he did not have the look of the athlete of the day, but something about him made him connect with the audience. He could talk you into the building and send you home happy with his truly endearing blue-eyed soul. And it was this average look, this appeal of the working man, this appeal to someone in the audience that may not look like an athlete but could get up there and fight, that made him the American Dream. There were very few wrestlers on his level that represented the common man in the audience the way he did. So much so that it eventually became something he was synonymous with, being the working class hero. That appeal and popularity led to him becoming the NWA World Heavyweight Champion in 1979 and once again in 1981. And what can be considered the pinnacle of his career in the mid-1980s, he became the head booker as well as a top performer in Jim Crockett Promotions, one of the top NWA territories in the world, feuding with legends like Nature Boy Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, Harley Race, Blackjack Mulligan, Terry Funk, and others. It was during a feud in 1985 that he cut the now iconic Hard Times promo, one that is still quoted by wrestling fans and pro wrestlers to this day, undoubtedly the most famous promo of his career, culminating in him winning the NWA World title for the third time the following year. Rhodes was unceremoniously let go in 1988 by the NWA after an incident on TV where Road Warrior Animal caused a visible bleeding laceration on his face. Why was this a fireable offense? This is pro wrestling. What's going on? Because the promotion's majority owners at the time, Turner Broadcasting Systems, had a clear rule against those old school wrestling bleeding tactics. 88 was also a memorable year for another member of the Rhodes family. Dusty Rhodes got his start in pro wrestling with Championship Wrestling from Florida, briefly teaming with Blackjack Mulligan's son, Kendall Windham, to no success. 2 months after that, Dustin signed with the rebranded Jim Crockett Promotions, now known as WCW World Championship Wrestling, just 2 months after his debut match under the name Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes, meanwhile, jumped ship to WWE. After wrestling for them for a few appearances in the 1970s, he was never really seen as a WWE, or at the time, WWF guy. Although he was an established veteran of the business by that point, Vince McMahon infamously gave him the polka dot gimmick, seemingly in spite of Dusty's longtime association with WWE's rival promotions. Or at least it depends on who you talk to. Despite the gimmick on the surface feeling like something you wouldn't want to have put on you, Dusty ran with it. He truly embraced the polka dots and several memorable vignettes that reintroduced him to the bigger WWE audience as a common working man who would fight for them. He had feuds against top names like Macho Man Randy Savage and $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, and was a force to be reckoned with in 1990. Dusty, with Sweet Sapphire and Randy Savage's ex-manager Miss Elizabeth at ringside, played a role in WrestleMania 6, taking on the Macho King and the sensational Queen Sherry. It was at this point that Dusty Rhodes got his first opportunity in WWE, and his relationship with his father, Dusty, was fully acknowledged on TV, with the two working together. Although the relationship really may have not been that great off camera, they got to play out several different angles involving the $1 Million Man. But it's unclear whether or not they made up during their time in WWE. For one, Dustin was furious with his father for the past of leaving him at home as a young child, while Dusty went out on the wrestling roads that are quite demanding. Also, Dustin was furious at his father for booking himself to be the main event in WCW and NWA because he had creative power. But the relationship worsened after he left for WWE, with Dustin feeling that Dusty betrayed the people who made him a star in the NWA, now WCW. They still worked together, and Dusty dropped the polka dots when he paired with his son on TV and went back to being his old American Dream self. Although it should have set him up for bigger things, the politics of WWE were simply too big a factor for him to succeed beyond what he was doing. He ended up playing a supporting role for Virgil, turning babyface on $1 Million Man instead. That's why when the opportunity presented itself for Dusty Rhodes to return to WCW as a chief creative officer and booker, he didn't waste much time jumping ship. His initial firing in 1988 from WCW a few years earlier wasn't putting him on the best of terms, but there was a lot of political turmoil within the company itself, and a disastrous spell of booking from Ole Anderson meant that the American Dream was being welcomed back to the company to steer the ship right. Along with him came his son Dustin. Dustin had the best run of his career so far up to this point, 4 years in with WCW. Going by the name The Natural Dusty Rhodes, he became tag team champions with legends like Barry Windham and Ricky Steamboat, and even became the US heavyweight champion. He also teamed with Sting, Davey Boy Smith, and the debuting Shockmaster. Yeah, victorious in an effort over Big Van Vader, Harlem Heat, and Sid Vicious in War Games. The less said about the Shockmaster, the better, right? Still, he wasn't able to reach the level he wanted, and in what is the first and only King of the Road match, Dusty Rhodes lost to Blacktop Bully. The only reason why this is relevant is because both men got fired for their intentional bleeding in the match, ending his second WCW stint, similar to how his father's ended 6 years earlier. How are you not supposed to bleed when you're fighting in a match that takes place in the flatbed of a truck? Yeah, with a cage on it. It's pretty weird. Dusty, meanwhile, took an entirely different role in WCW. With the peak of his in-ring career in the rear view, he became more of a backstage figure, trying to produce a wrestling show that could compete with WWE. While making on-screen appearances, he became the manager of Ron Simmons. But his on-screen roles weren't too significant, and he wrestled sporadically at this time. Dusty and Dustin's relationship did get better in WCW for a period of time, with the two getting involved in an on-screen storyline that saw Dusty's in a run in 1994, seeing him team up with his son to defeat Arn Anderson and Bunkhouse Buck in a steel cage match. Very memorable stuff, and one of the most underrated WCW storylines of all time. Dusty's larger-than-life personality then shifted over into the broadcasting role, which he stuck to for the entirety of 1995 before the launch of the NWO story. He ended up siding with the NWO, I know, no one was expecting that, and became Scott Hall and Kevin Nash's manager for a while as well, even at one point replacing Scott Hall in a tag team match in 1998. But he wasn't very important in the grand scheme of things when it came to the NWO storyline, getting unceremoniously sacked by the group by Eazy-E Eric Bischoff after he was done. During this time, Dusty Rhodes made his first of many returns to WWE, but he would do this one in a very, very different way, taking on the infamous role of Goldust. Yes, in glittered black and gold face paint, a tight bodysuit, this was a character that only through the dust part made reference to his past, but was something completely different, constantly being referred to as androgynous and being crafted in a way to make audiences feel uncomfortable and test their limitations of what you could do with a character who definitely made a lot of sexual references. It's important to remember that homophobia was rampant in Western pop culture at the time, but Goldust managed to play with that edginess and knock it out of the park while getting a lot of attention, starting off as a hated villain and being paired with his real-life wife, Marlena, actual name Terry Runnels, and going on to beat Razor Ramon to win the Intercontinental Championship in 1996. It's also important to remember that this was a prelude to all the different things that would happen with Attitude Era. That's right, he was Attitude before Attitude. Before Stone Cold Steve Austin took over and flipped people the bird, Goldust and Marlena were too good to be hated and turned into babyface after the debut of China in late 96. During this time, Dusty Rhodes was battling a long-time addiction to drugs and alcohol. He even recalled an incident in 1996 when he was still very popular when he was alone with WWE Chairman Vince McMahon in a washroom and the Big Boss saw him take some pills. Dustin recalled him speaking in a father-like manner saying, "We had a conversation for about 30 minutes on why I should not do what I'm doing and get addicted to things because he's seen it before. He watched them come and go and die from them. He was really talking to me like a father figure. I'm listening to him and painting my face. I'm trying to respect what he's saying and all, but I was going to do what I was going to do." Regardless of the negative things going on in his life outside of the ring, he made adjustments to his on-screen presence in WWE television, taking on his real name briefly, Dustin Runnels, before eventually going back to the artist formerly known as Goldust. Yeah, it was a back and forth thing. He started to do some pretty out there things like imitate celebrities and other wrestlers, entering into this weird period where he was China Dust, and then he was Dusty Dust. Yeah, a mockery of his father, and Marilyn Manson Dust, and many more. The remaining 2 years weren't anything to really note, with Dustin reverting back to his real name and speaking out against the Attitude Era's edgy content, while also winning the Intercontinental title for a very brief period of time. His jump over to WCW in the middle of the Monday Night Wars wasn't a very good one in 1999. With practically nothing memorable happening, he was supposed to debut as a character named Seven, inspired by the movie Dark City, but Turner Broadcasting interfered with the fear that he would be mistaken for a child abductor and led to the gimmick being scrapped, even though a lot of vignettes and extra content was filmed for the rollout and debut of this otherworldly character. Yeah, what about that floating entrance? Yeah, so they introduced the Seven character. Dustin's out there, this big over-the-top entrance. Turn off the music now. I want everybody in here to take a good look at the crap I'm in. I left the World Wrestling Federation for gimmicks like this. For all of you that don't know, I was Goldust, and Goldust sucked, and Goldust nearly ruined my wrestling career. You see, I wanted to come back to WCW because this is home for me, and I wanted to be me, just me, because that's what I can do, just be me. But the powers that be came to me and they said, Dustin, you know, Dustin sucks. Dustin is boring. In this same worked shoot promo, Dustin also defended his father, who he said was released from the company after 25 years of service by those powers that be. Yeah, this was that time in WCW. Dustin did not jump back to WWE after WCW was bought out in 2001 by WWE and Vince McMahon. He rejoined them in late 2001. Dusty, meanwhile, had a brief stint in ECW before returning to WCW and teaming with his son to beat Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett in the company's final pay-per-view titled Greed. It was very fitting that both Flair and Dusty, who were synonymous with the long history of WCW, were a part of its final pay-per-view. Back over in WWE, Goldust had a bit of a renaissance in his return to WWE, winning the Hardcore Championship 9 times before having a surprisingly successful odd pairing with Booker T. The duo's backstage comedy skits are still remembered to this day as some of the funnier segments from this period in WWE television. Remember those ridiculous bits where Goldust was so over the top with something and then immediately Booker T would just fly off and yell, "Tell me you did not just say that." However, the pairing was broken off soon after in late 2003. WWE revealed that they were going to let Goldust's contract expire, after which he left in December of that year. In 2003, Dusty Rhodes joined the recently formed promotion of Total Nonstop Action, which would eventually become Impact Wrestling, even teaming up with Vader and also getting to face a future legend in the form of a very young AJ Styles. Once more, he played a bigger backstage role, becoming the company's head creative booker before one fine day when President Dixie Carter told him that Jeremy Borash, Bill Banks, and Scott D'Amore would be taking over as the booking committee. Dusty didn't have a problem with the committee itself, but felt that some of them didn't have enough product knowledge and wanted a say in who could be on the committee. Seeing the writing on the wall, he sat out his contract with TNA and went back to WWE to do some very big things. We'll get to them in a little bit. For Dustin Rhodes, though, this was a trying time in his life. He had yet to reach the peak of how bad the effects of substance abuse were on him, and the huge toll it was taking on him and his personal relationships. It can also be seen as the fact that he was regularly flip-flopping between companies. After being rehired by WWE in late 2005, it took him little over half a year to be unfortunately let go again for no-showing an event. And by this point, even WWE knew that there was an issue, and he was becoming a liability due to these problems he had.
And his run in TNA between 2007 and 2008 was one that everyone wants to forget. He spent that time mostly portraying Black Rain. See, it isn't Goldust, it's silver and black, and it's Black Rain. Yeah, it was just like a darker version of Goldust or whatever. It just wasn't Goldust. He didn't show up for some TV tapings for a long period of time, forcing the company to terminate his contract. Thankfully, after this, he would begin to get his life back together and gain better health. Let's go back a few years. For Dusty Rhodes, when he signed a Legends deal with WWE in the mid-2000s, this opened the door for another member of the family business to build his own spotlight. Cody Rhodes, who was Dusty's son with his second wife, was successful in amateur wrestling in the state of Georgia before going out west to try and break into Hollywood acting, before coming back home and approaching his father, asking to break into another business, the family business, pro wrestling. Though Cody made brief appearances as a child on camera in WCW alongside his father, his real presentation and first speaking role in front of the WWE audience was at his father's momentous Hall of Fame induction in 2007, where some backstage felt he really stole the show. This aspiring Cody Rhodes had the athletic fundamentals and support of his father since a young age, but his real running the ropes wrestling training came in WWE's developmental territory, OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, in the Kentucky region, the same territory where the likes of John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, and many more all were crafted into the superstars they would become. It didn't take very long for Cody Rhodes to be called up from the main roster, debuting in a backstage segment with his father in 2007. 2007 was a big year for Dusty Rhodes. He was taking on an expansive role backstage for WWE, but he also had critical moments on screen with them. His WWE Hall of Fame induction and his final match for the WWE, where he took on Randy Orton, who was still in his legend-killing days, at the Great American Bash pay-per-view, losing before Cody prevented any further damage against his father. Cody, meanwhile, had a friendship with Hardcore Holly, turning on him, aligning with a fellow second-generation superstar and Ted DiBiase Jr. Cody and the $1 Million Son had the look and the ability to present themselves as future superstars on top of the well-noted pedigree, but it wouldn't work out the way either one of them had planned. Getting back to Dustin Rhodes here for a second, he joined Cody in inducting their father in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2007. He cleaned up his health, got sober, and had a strong 4-year run with WWE, playing a lower mid-card comedy role, something that wasn't so bad considering the incredible turmoil he faced in the previous decade. Cody Rhodes was now getting reps on international television and running the roads with Randy Orton and Ted DiBiase in the Legacy faction, where DiBiase and himself got to take on D-Generation X and many other people. They also played a secondary role to Orton in some major main events, and eventually the entire faction fell apart with a big triple threat match where Orton won it all at WrestleMania. 2010 saw Cody Rhodes truly start to establish himself as his own individualized character, one that was narcissistic, one that spent a lot of time looking in the mirror and telling you how beautiful he was, one that apparently the WWE divas in the locker room said was the most dashing. Dashing Cody Rhodes, introduced to the audience, was also one that would mock them for their own lack of hygiene and their ability to not be as simply beautiful as he was. Cody Rhodes would also form a briefly successful pairing to win the WWE Tag Team Championship gold with another future breakout superstar, Drew McIntyre. Cody Rhodes had another tag team title around his waist. He continued to be dashing. He continued to get booed by WWE fans, but he wasn't going up the ranks until it all turned wrong. A facial injury forced him to don a protective mask and also don one mentally and become a recluse, getting mad, getting crazy,
getting deranged. How dare you steal my beauty?
2011 saw Cody Rhodes go in a wild different direction. While still dashing, he suffered a facial injury at the hands of the legendary Rey Mysterio. Superhero Mysterio now had to face a motivated, embittered, and facially injured Cody Rhodes, who is no longer dashing, donning a disfigured mask, and being ridiculed by the audience. He had to make them wear paper bags en route to WrestleMania 27, where he was victorious over Rey Mysterio. Cody may not have been a main event superstar, but he was doing something that showed that in the future, he definitely could carry that position. Still wearing that Bill Lambier face mask for some reason, Cody Rhodes would win the WWE Intercontinental title, his first singles championship in WWE, in August on SmackDown in 2011. Eventually, the face mask came off, and Cody started to play mind games with the very, very big, we mean big Show, heading into WrestleMania 28, only to lose the title to the world's largest athlete. Cody would recapture the IC title from him at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view less than a month after Mania.
Dusty Rhodes, meanwhile, took up a role as a trainer and creative figure for WWE NXT, at the time cultivating young and upcoming talent. A new revitalized version of WWE's developmental system at the time featured future big names like Paige, Roman Reigns, Finn Balor, Sasha Banks, Seth Rollins, Bayley, Sami Zayn, and many others. And they were all being dubbed Dusty's kids, but not like his actual kids. You get the idea. His role was even further acknowledged in 2013 when Goldust returned to the fold and teamed up with his brother Cody Rhodes in a battle against the Authority. Both brothers were fired unceremoniously on screen by the Authority faction led by Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, with a very, very emotional Dusty Rhodes begging for his sons to get their jobs back in WWE. If there's one thing Dusty can do, he can make you feel something, and when you feel for your own children, it is very easy to project that emotion. It led to an incredibly high-stakes matchup at the Battleground event that year, stealing the show, where the Rhodes brothers teamed up against The Shield, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns, with Dusty Rhodes backing them up at ringside. But it wasn't for the tag team titles. It was for the Rhodes to get their jobs back in WWE. But Dusty would also lose his job in NXT if they didn't win. Everything was on the line. The family business was truly being played out in storyline on television. The Rhodes brothers won the match in what became an instant classic and one of the best WWE matches of that year. And they became tag team champions for a while, but things would sadly go downhill for a little bit. Despite the pairing doing some incredible things, Cody transitioned into the character of Stardust in 2014. Yes, this was just like a zany, wilder, weirder version of Goldust, and it effectively put a ceiling on his WWE career. Sadly, in 2015, Dusty Rhodes passed away from a short illness at the age of 69. The loss and grief of this beloved legend, the American Dream, was felt across the entire wrestling universe, with his longtime rival and good friend, Ric Flair, tweeting, "My mentor, Dusty Rhodes, much love to your family and more respect than can ever be measured. Love you, Dream." His prolific influence on the wrestling business is truly immeasurable, as Flair stated. The tributes poured in on WWE television and across social media, WWE even enshrining Dusty with his own statue. His endearing love and creative perspective, if you will, is something you can feel on all of the main superstars in today's WWE. Though he still put on the costume that he described as a trash bag, Cody gave Stardust 100%.
and still tried to make it work in the role that he had, even luring in TV star from the DC superhero series Arrow, Stephen Amell, for a special celebrity-driven tag team match, with Amell tagging with Neville to face Stardust and Wade Barrett at SummerSlam. This correlated with Cody being able to do some cameo roles on the CW series outside of his taxing WWE schedule. And looking outside of WWE is what Cody was starting to do. The Stardust character was simply starting to blow as dust in the wind, and so was Cody's desire for a future in WWE at the time. What was certainly a bigger factor for him was the creative direction of his character, with Cody begging to end the Stardust run to no avail. There was even a segment shot for a new, fresh character for Cody, inspired by Tony Stark from the Iron Man Marvel films in a Rhodes Industry-type gimmick, but it never came to fruition, and a clip of a canceled new character is floating around YouTube to this day. So, leaving WWE was not easy. It was not simply honoring his father's rebel legacy within the industry or simply just saying he was fed up. It was really about him making a statement by leaving, going out on his own for the first time outside of WWE, where he had spent almost his entire career, to the wilderness of the independent scene, the privileged son taking his own path. If he stayed, he would have simply been a lifer within WWE's comfort zone, accepting a paycheck while never really feeling fulfilled. As it turned out, leaving WWE to wrestle on the independent scene was the biggest possible decision Cody could have made. He created a lot of hype around this before his non-compete clause ended, allowing him to really run with it, posting a list of the top wrestlers outside of WWE that he wanted to face and going on to fulfill almost every match on that list. He became the hottest star on the independent wrestling scene at the time, which was blowing up, and he went on to compete for Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, PWG, Ring of Honor, where he even became the Ring of Honor World Champion. Oh yeah, and he got a little too sweet over in New Japan by joining the hottest faction in wrestling at the time, the Bullet Club, forging a real-life friendship with the elite of the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, setting the stage for his next big move. Financially, leaving WWE was also a blessing in disguise, as Cody has revealed that he was making considerably more on the independent wrestling scene outside of WWE's bubble, with advanced abilities to sell merchandise online and connect with fans in a completely different way. But the chance he took on himself led to something much bigger than just his career, but a renaissance within wrestling. His response to noted wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer's now famous tweet that declared that no one outside of WWE could really draw a crowd of 10,000 into an arena within North America prompted him to do the game-changing event that became the all-star wrestling extravaganza, All In, which set a huge record for a non-WWE show at the time. Over 10,000 packed into the Now Arena in suburban Chicago for an event that was led by Cody and the Elite that felt like everything was changing. There was a wild, active space within wrestling that was not ran by anyone named McMahon. The show itself was very eventful, seeing Cody capture the NWA World Championship, a title held by his father, from Nick Aldis in a classic bout. All In was an event that was as seismic a shift within the wrestling industry as the first WrestleMania. The game was different, and I'm not talking about Triple H. Why All In was so important is because it gained the attention of Tony Khan, who was actually involved in getting some talent to the show and forming what would eventually become All Elite Wrestling in 2019, with Cody and the Young Bucks serving as executive vice presidents. This was around the same time that Dusty Rhodes was wrapping up his WWE career for good, having his longest run in the company at the time for 6 years before requesting his release to join this breakout faction with his brother in AEW. Yeah, there was money, there was interest, there was something else happening outside of WWE, and the Rhodes family once again was a part of making it special. And it was here where he had the greatest match of his career against his brother Cody.
It was the Double or Nothing show-stealing event that saw Cody Rhodes versus Dusty Rhodes. Cody trying to shed the shadow of his brother, Dustin trying to reinvigorate himself at the age of 50, and he did so with an all-time classic, a match that truly started to put AEW on the map. Dustin remained with AEW ever since, being a mentor to many of the young talents and helping elevate them to new heights while occasionally stepping inside the ropes himself. He seems to have found a home and a groove there while not having to be Goldust, but certainly being someone beloved for his accomplishments. As the legacy of the Rhodes name surges on, let's focus exclusively on the American Nightmare. Cody was one of the centerpieces of AEW and enjoyed champion success with 3 reigns as the TNT champion. However, backstage, things weren't going as good for him, as he felt like he was losing maybe some of his influence as an executive vice president. He also put a ceiling on himself in kayfabe by stating that he wouldn't get involved with the AEW World Heavyweight Championship picture, a decision that he later regretted and tied to a loss of a Punk and Bryan Danielson coming over from WWE for those big competitive paydays, and he felt like maybe his time wasn't right for him to stay there, but to maybe go back and finish some things. The reports started to surge in late 2021 into 2022 that Cody Rhodes' time with AEW was almost done and that he was working without a contract with the company. And when this news got to the top level of WWE, Vince McMahon himself personally flew out to see Cody Rhodes in person and convince him to sign with WWE and come back home, agreeing to let him keep his character, the American Nightmare, the theme song, everything. It was going to be a completely outside of WWE character that was already established, being presented within the high-level production standard that WWE had already created. It's almost surprising how rapid Cody's rise in WWE has been since he returned, but that 6-year absence was crucial, not only to himself, but to the entire wrestling industry. If Cody never left the WWE, we may have never seen the formation of AEW. An anxious calm fell over 80,000 people packed into AT&T Stadium in Texas at WrestleMania. Seth Rollins was waiting for his mystery opponent to come out to the ring at WrestleMania. Except it wasn't a mystery to anyone following wrestling media at the time. Cody Rhodes returned to WWE in the biggest possible way, with his brand, with his name, the American Nightmare, the theme song, all of it. Yeah, this was a character he crafted outside of WWE. And if the time he spent away from WWE wasn't as impactful as it was outside of the WWE system, it wouldn't be this impactful within the WWE system on the biggest wrestling show of the year, WrestleMania. On a weekend where Stone Cold Steve Austin came out of retirement, Cody was still the most talked about man. He went on to have a series of outstanding matches with Seth Rollins, getting injured, tearing his pectoral muscle right before a big Hell in a Cell match, his first big returning pay-per-view main event in Chicago, where he was still able to finish the match and have the Sportskeeda wrestling match of the year. Cody seems like the perfect fit for WWE in 2023, having won the Royal Rumble and main eventing WrestleMania, unsuccessfully but still having an outstanding match with Roman Reigns. Something neither his father nor his brother were able to do, main event a WrestleMania. And the best part of it all, it seems like he's only getting started. The story has not finished yet. The dynasty of the Rhodes family is not a simple one. It has been filled with years of difficult challenges, financial issues, substance abuse, and a lot of company changes affecting the people that worked for the company. When you look at the bigger picture, Cody Rhodes himself hasn't had as bad as minus a few years of creative frustration, notable injuries that a lot of wrestlers deal with. It all makes sense though. These are challenges he was born to take on. His father was bred of hard times. His brother grew out of them. The history of the Rhodes family has shown they are ready for hard times, and they're ready to conquer them.